after finishing with the pectoral region and the scapular region, now we next switch on to the dissection of the arm. Arm lies on the side of the human body. So we know the bones of the arm and their arrangement before going into the dissection part and the other parts of the arm. So the outer layer is the skin, and just below the skin lies the superficial fascia, which contains yellow color fat, loose alveolar tissue and cutaneous artery, veins, nerves, lymphatics and lymph. Same is here also. Thorax and the abdomen. So two layers of the human body are the same from head to toe. Skin and below the skin is the superficial fascia. Then below the superficial fascia there is a deep fascia, which is made up of the compact, closely woven collagen fibers. And this deep fascia gives shape to the human body part, plus it protects the deeper structures, that is the muscles, big artery, veins and nerves. So this is the axillary fascia, deep fascia, which is dome shape or umbrella shape. This roundness of the axillary fascia is maintained by the upward pull of the clavipectoral fascia that we have already done. So this is the skin region, and below the three layers of the human body. Then we also know what is the bone in the front of the arm. The bone of the brachium or the arm is the humerus, with a smooth head, spherical, and where the smoothness ends, that is called the anatomical neck. Laterally there is a greater tubercle, and medially there is a lesser tubercle. Then this shaft of the humerus suddenly narrows down. The sudden narrowness is the weak point, that is called the surgical neck of the humerus. Anteriorly there is a gap between the two tubercles. This is called the bicipital groove or called the intertubercular groove. It has got lateral leg, it has got medial leg, and it has got a floor. This is the lateral part of the humerus, which bears the deltoid tuberosity, slightly elevated rough part. Then the medial body will continue downward and the humerus becomes anteroposteriorly flattened to form the lateral epicondyle. Below the lateral condyle of the humerus is converted into a round capitulum made for the articulation with the head of the, to form the pivot joint example. This is the example of pivot joint. Radiohumeral head is the example of pivot joint. Other pivot joint is the atlantoaxial. This is the medial border of the humerus coming downward. Just above is the medial epicondyle, which is very near to the skin. And the medial condyle below is converted into a trochlea or the pulley-like structure. Trochlea for the trochlear notch of the ulna. The upper end of the ulna, the anterior surface is rough. This is called the coronoid process, leading to the shaft of the ulna. Above the ulna is the ulnar, above the trochlea is the ulnar fossa, and above the capitulum is the radial fossa, where the upper end of the radius and ulna fits in full flexion at the elbow joint. So this was the accommodation of the upper end. Laterally, head of the humerus, which is lateral in position, is now communicated with the shallow triangular glenoid cavity, that is the lateral angle of the scapula. The superior border of the scapula bears the suprascapular notch, and the superior angle, the medial border of the scapula, and below is the inferior angle of the scapula. And here it bears the Coracoid fossa is therefore shift. And this whole anterior fossa is called the subscapular fossa. So in the dissection part of the front of the arm, we cut the skin in the middle of the arm and we reflect the skin on either side. Below the skin we find the superficial fascia, which contains cutaneous arteries, veins and nerves. Cutaneous nerves, they are the medial cutaneous nerve of the arm, lateral cutaneous nerve of the arm, lower lateral cutaneous nerve of the arm and medial cutaneous nerve of the arm. The upper medial part of this part of the patch of the skin of the medial aspect of the arm is supplied by the intercostobrachial nerve, which is the lateral cutaneous branch of the second thoracic ventral rami. So that is the cutaneous innervation. These nerves we will find in the superficial fascia. Just we have removed the skin and we are encountering these cutaneous nerves. You have to remember of them. After that we remove the fat and the superficial fascia. Now what we expect is the deep fascia. This deep fascia of the arm is called the brachium. That is the arm. And this deep fascia invests and see the cause the roundness of the arm is maintained by the deep fascia of the arm. Then we cut this deep fascia in the medial and lateral and medial aspects and we remove it like the skin. What we see that this deep fascia is attached to the medial border of the humerus. The septa goes from the medial border of the humerus to the investing deep fascia. Similarly, from the lateral border, below the lateral tuberosity, a lateral intermuscular septum attached to the lateral border of the humerus and attached to the investing deep fascia of the arm. So these two septa, lateral and the medial intermuscular septa, they divide the arm into two compartments, in front of the humerus, in front of the lateral intermuscular septum and in front of the medial intermuscular septum. This whole is called the anterior compartment of the arm. And whatever lies behind it, that is the posterior compartment, which is the extensor compartment. And anterior compartment is called the flexor compartment. So we are doing the front of the arm, means we are concerned with the flexor compartment. So after removal of the deep fascia, what we find below the deep fascia, what are the contents? Anything which lies below the deep fascia are the deeper structures of the human body. So in the front of the arm, the deeper structures, they are the muscles, artery, big nerves and the veins. The muscles in the anterior compartment, they are, number one is coracobrachialis. Name of the muscle is coracobrachialis. Second muscle is the biceps brachialis. Biceps brachialis. Third muscle is the brachialis. Fourth muscle is the brachioradialis. Fifth muscle is the extensor carpi radialis longus. And last muscle is now disease is very important muscle, the deltoid. These six muscles we encounter in the dissection after removal of the skin, superficial fascia and the deep fascia of the arm. Wherever the muscle comes, 5 fingers come, we have to know about it. All 5 muscles, 6 muscles, origin, insertion, action, nerve supply and apply. So we will take one by one. So first muscle is the thoracobrachialis. To go into the name. Name is telling so many things. So name is thoracobrachialis means it is something is concerned with the thoracoid process of the scapula, and brachialis means to the arm, bone of the arm, that is the humerus. So this muscle has got some relation with the scapula and the humerus. So that we have to remember is the origin of the muscle and then its insertion. So origin of this muscle is from the lateral aspect of the coracoid process. The medial aspect we have done it. Which muscle is inserted here? Pectoralis minor. You should know how to mark the muscle. Whenever you are sitting in the hall, ideally take bone, take the chalk and start marking it. What I have marked, this is the pectoral. In the practical exam, we will provide you the bones, we will provide you the chalk. You have to mark exactly the insertion and origin of the muscles. Particularly upper limb and lower limb, their bones are very, very important. So don't sit ideally in the D hall. You have to make these markings so many times, then it will be thorough. 10 times, 20 times, 40 times, 50 times. Rub it, again mark. Then little weight. What I have marked? Origin of thoracobrachialis. And combined with it, short head of bicep also. The short head of the bicep and the thoracobrachialis has got the common origin. From which part? Lateral part of the coracoid process of scapula, that is your arms. And this is how to mark in the exam. Job, and you have to show to the examiner this one. They are separate. This is the exact. So the thoracobrachialis muscle takes origin from the lateral aspect of the coracoid process and combined with the short head of the bicep. Short head of the bicep is lateral in position and thoracobrachialis is medial. Thoracobrachialis. Now this muscle is going downward and laterally in front of the shoulder joint, and it is inserted on the humerus. Which part? That is important. So it is inserted on the upper medial 5 centimeter of the shaft of the humerus. Upper medial 5 centimeter of the shaft of the humerus is inserted of thoracobrachialis. And this insertion is very, very important because at the level of the thoracobrachialis insertion, about 10 things occur, as we have done in the sternal angle. Same is it. You have to remember 10 things occurring at the level of insertion of thoracobrachialis. So origin, insertion, now the action. For the action, keep the origin bone fixed and contract the muscle. Where the humerus bone will move, that will give you the clue of what is called the thoracobrachialis. This muscle, this is 5 centimeter. So when it contracts, so where it will move? Upward. And what is this? This is coracoid process, this is the humerus, 5 centimeter. Whenever it contracts, the arm will move forward. And what is the forward position? Flexion at the shoulder joint. That is the action. Flexion at the shoulder joint plus adduction also. That is the thoracobrachialis. Nerve supply. So nerve supply of the thoracobrachialis is continuation of the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. As you know, lateral cord of the brachial plexus is continued as which nerve? Musculocutaneous. Any lateralmost nerve you feel in the brachial plexus is the musculocutaneous. And any medialmost nerve of the brachial plexus, medial cord is continued as ulnar nerve. But you have to remember, lateralmost nerve of brachial plexus is musculocutaneous and medialmost nerve is the ulnar nerve. So every day you have to make brachial plexus. Every day you have to make the diagram of brachial plexus. then it will be thought. And revise every day root values of musculocutaneous, Arm's punch, median nerve, radial nerve. That is your homework. Every day you have to make, if 1 month is of the upper limb, so 30 diagrams of the brachial plexus you have to make. Then it will be thorough. Then you will be able to make without seeing a book. Because I have already told you, brachial plexus is the backbone of the upper limb. That's why you are not telling me what is the musculocutaneous. It means you are not thoroughly know the brachial plexus. You don't know what is the medial cortical continuum. Nobody has answered. It means you are very poor in brachial plexus. Make every day at least one diagram. Then will be. So musculocutaneous nerve is the insertion of the nerve supply, and as you know from the previous lecture, this is the insertion of the third, fourth and fifth rib is the pectoralis minor, and below the pectoralis minor lies the first part of axillary artery, second part is behind, and then the third part of axillary artery. And to the third part of the axillary artery, lateral cord is lateral, medial cord is medial, posterior cord is. So this lateral cord is continued as musculo. The musculocutaneous nerve arising from the lateral cord after giving the lateral root of median nerve. She is free. Now she is free. Now she will call that I am not lateral cord. Call me musculocutaneous. Because coracobrachial is waiting for me. And this musculocutaneous will pierce the coracobrachial muscle, enter into it, descend downward and supplies it. Then it comes out of it. And second muscle is waiting, which has the combined origin with it. That is the short head of. Then this nerve will enter into short head of the bicep and supplies it out. This is the course of the musculocutaneous. How muscles are supplied, if you know the brachial plexus, if you know the relation with the axillary artery, you can make the diagram. So this is musculocutaneous. So after supplying muscle, it becomes sensory or cutaneous. That's why its name is musculocutaneous. It has got motor as well as sensory component. So that is how we use the coracobrachialis muscle. The second muscle is biceps brachia. Bicep brachia means two. It has got two heads. One is the lateral head, long head, and that is the short head. Short head, we have seen that it takes origin combined with the coracoid process with the coracobrachialis. The long head takes origin from supraglenoid tubercle. So long head of the bicep takes origin from supraglenoid tubercle. The shallow glenoid cavity, this is the two tubercle. One is supraglenoid, one is infraglenoid. From supraglenoid, which muscle takes origin? Long head of the, and it is very important, origin is special. For the origin of the long head of the bicep, you have to remember three words. Number one, it is tendinous. Number two, intracapsular. Number three, extrasynovial. Write down. So whenever anybody asks you what is the specialty of the origin of the biceps muscle is, it is tendinous. Intracapsular, it goes inside the fibrous capsule of the shoulder joint. Despite inside the capsule, but it is outside the synovial membrane, that is called extrasynovial. Three words, remember. So after taking origin from here, usually muscles at the origin is fleshy. Muscles, they are thick at the origin, and at the insertion they become narrow and become tendinous, and what we call them? Tender. But here it is opposite. It is insertion-like, cylindrical, narrow, tendon-like origin, and it descends downward from the supraglenoid tubercle, and inside the fibrous capsule it runs anterior to the head of the humerus, because a groove is waiting for it. A groove is waiting. This groove is intertubercular bicipital. Why it is called bicipital? Because it is made for long head of the bicep. So the long head of the bicep will enter into this bicipital groove. The fibrous capsule is encircling and attached to the supraglenoid tubercle, above the supraglenoid tubercle, taking the supraglenoid tubercle intracapsular. Then this fibrous capsule is attached to the anatomical neck of the humerus. But when it comes the intertubercular groove, the fibrous capsule has got a perforation. A gap is there, and this gap is for the exit of the long head of the bicep. So at this point, at the upper end of the bicipital groove, the long head of the bicep, which was intracapsular, now at this point it becomes extracapsular, to be accommodated in the bicipital groove. And see, it is a quite deep groove. So this long head of the bicep encircles around the head of the humerus, and it keeps the glenoid cavity in touch with the head of the humerus in all movements of the shoulder joint. So this long head of the bicep acts as a sling over it, and it prevents the superior dislocation of the shoulder joint. So this is one of the maneuver to give the stability to the shoulder joint, which is otherwise a very weak joint. Secondly, it is a multi-axial joint. You can move the shoulder joint in any direction. So more is the movement, more is the gyration, more is the chances of dislocation. So this long head of the bicep, why it has made the intracapsular origin? To give the stability. That is the reason why it is so. Why is the intracapsular? So after running in the bicipital groove for a while, at the lower end of this bicipital groove, this long head of the bicep comes out, and the short head is waiting for it. Both the brothers meet together to form what is called the dola, or what is called the bicep. This thickness of your front of your arm is called bicep brake. Two heads, long head, short head. So its origin is very special. Only long head. Short head is also special. Why? Because it is also sharing its origin with the brachioradialis, the coracobrachialis. Again, both heads are important in their origin. The insertion is much more important than the origin. So the tendon of the bicep femoris, this brachii, comes down in front of the head in front of the shaft of the humerus, and it is ready for insertion. It is crossing the two joints. One is the shoulder joint, it is crossing. Another is ready to cross the another joint, that is called elbow joint also. So it crosses in front of the fibrous capsule of the elbow joint, and the muscle has a cylindrical tendon running in front of it. The fibrous capsule of the shoulder is this elbow joint, and this fossa is called the cubital fossa. The hollow in front of your elbow joint is called the cubital fossa, so it occupies the anterior position in the cubital fossa, just lateral to the brachial artery. The brachial artery lies medial to it. The same with the brachial artery, axillary artery is continued as brachial artery. When we have already done the axilla, you know what is the axilla and the contents. So I won't repeat it. Axilla you know much better than me. and lateral to tit. Here lies a nerve that is called the radial nerve. So that is the mutual position. Medial to this tendon lies the brachial artery and lateral lies the radial nerve. And it is very important to remember where it will be inserted. The tendon of the bicep brachii will be inserted on tibial tuberosity, this radial tuberosity. Not head, not neck, to the radial tuberosity. Another very important is not on the anterior surface of the radial tuberosity, which is readily available. No, it goes and inserted on posterior surface of the radial tuberosity, underline it. Posterior surface of the radial tuberosity. So again the special is its insertion. It was easy for the tendon of the bicep to be inserted on the front surface of the anterior surface available, but no, it goes behind it, and then it is inserted on posterior surface of the tuberosity, and there is a bursa is present between the tendon and the radial tuberosity. The bursa is a fluid-filled sac. Bursa. B-U-R-S-A, bursa means fluid-filled sac. Wherever there are chances that there is a friction between the muscle or the bone, there is a small cushion-like structure is there. That is called the bursa. The fluid in it make it comfortable, and it will keep the tendon as away as possible from the bone. So it increases the distance between the tendon and the bone, so the tendon is saved from friction and from torn away. So that the bursa, so many bursas are present, bigger and smaller. So they are like the cushion. As you are all sitting on the table, wooden table, and when you go back, your back is touching the wooden. If we will provide you the cushion behind you, then you will be very comfortable. That cushion will, what will the cushion is doing? It is separating your skin of your back as away as possible from posterior hard wood. Same is the cushion. So these cushions, they are called the bursa, and their function. So what is the action now? Action of the bicep brachii when this muscle will contract. Where the radius will move? In which direction? This is the origin, this is the insertion. Radius is here. Where the radius will move? In which direction? Upward or downward? And what is the flexion at the elbow? The action is the flexion at the elbow. If this muscle has been inserted on the anterior aspect, then there would have been only one action, that is the flexion. But because of this insertion on the posterior surface, so when it contracts, what will happen? The upper end of the radius rotates laterally. It brings about rotation of the pivot joint between the capitulum and around superior surface of the head of the radius. So the head of the radius rotates around the fixed capitulum. And if your arm is pronated, now it brings about supinator. So write down, it is a powerful supinator. This is the reason why it has inserted on posterior surface of the radial tuberosity. If it would have been on the anterior aspect, only one action was there, only flexion at elbow joint. But this is a powerful supinator. For supination, it has to go back. It has to go on the, to be inserted on posterior surface of the radial. So that is important. So whenever you have to understand what is supination, first bring your forearm in pronation. If you want to know what is the pronation, bring the arm in the supination. Supination means siddhi. Pronation means puthi. P for putha, P for pronation, C for siddha, C for supination. If you are lying down on the face on the upper side, on the bed, this is supine. Siddha. Putheleto, prone. Same is from prone to pronation, from supine to supination. That you have to remember. So that is the action. Another thing about this bicep brachii muscle is, from its medial border of the tendon.